with the Australian Communications Consumer Action Network, have been responsible for ACCAN's work and access to communications for people with disability for over 13 years. Also on the stage with me is Gunilla Aspring, also somebody who's worked tirelessly and for many years in the area of accessibility for people with disability in accessing telecommunication services in Australia, and possibly the first person to put government purchasing of accessible ICT onto the Australian public policy agenda in 2001. The speakers, we've got a great group of expertise and experience from a diverse group of presenters. Our first presenter today will be Norton, who's coming from the Australian perspective and digital strategist who's worked for many years across multiple areas, including civil society, public service, and the private sector, in promoting access to information and communications technologies. Our second speaker is Greg Alchin, coming from Australia again, long-time advocate for the inclusion of people with disability. Greg's experience runs across the educational sphere, both vocational and tertiary, and is currently the principal accessibility lead for Service New South Wales, which is the New South Wales state agency responsible for delivering all government services to residents in New South Wales. Next speaker is Dr. Narasimhan, who's coming to us from India. Again, long-time advocate and supporter of access to greater inclusion of information and communications technology. Nirmita is currently the Senior Fellow and Project Lead for G3ICT, which is an international organization auspiced by the United Nations to promote greater access to communications technology for people with disabilities. And we also have Vashkar who's coming to us from Bangladesh and giving the Bangladesh experience. Again, a long-time advocate promoting the rights of people with disability in accessing communications. Vashkar is the national consultant with the Aspire to Innovate organization in Bangladesh, and also representatives for G3ICT. Better like that? Okay. Just a little bit about the format today. We'll have each of the speakers will present for about 7 minutes. And then at the end of that, we will open for discussion from the audience. Gunilla will be monitoring the online audience, and so if you have a comment or would like to ask a question or have something to say, please raise your virtual hand or wave at the screen, or alternatively you can put your question into the chat on Zoom. Now, we will also have people here in the room for the in-person audience. If you'd like to ask a question or have a comment, please raise your hand. We've got a roving mic which will come to you. So just a little background on this. The importance of this, I think that we're all sort of across how important access to information communications technology is becoming for everyday life. For most of us, with government services also increasingly becoming delivered over online services and digitally. It's important that all of citizens in all countries have access to that if they're going to be brought along in this, digital economy. So it's a very important topic, and I think be really interesting discussion and hear what's happening across various geographical jurisdictions and hear from the expertise and understandings from our panelists. So I guess without much more on that, I think we'll get into the discussion, and I'd like to pass over to you, Bri, to talk to us from your perspective. Thank you.
Look, thanks, Wayne. Thanks so much. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Excellent. It's not It's worth checking, right? So I'm just going to quickly share my screen with my slides. Hopefully you can see those now. Yeah, can you see my slides now?
I'd say yes.
Yes.
Excellent. Okay. Hello. Yeah, my name's Bree Norton. I'm the co-chair for AussieWay.org. It's a not-for-profit for digital accessibility professionals. I have worked as freelance contractor across lots of government departments and also as a public servant in Australia, especially at the federal level. I've also been an accessibility and inclusivity lead for the federal level at the Digital Transformation Agency, where I first started this work around accessible ICT procurement, and then also for Accessible New South Wales, which is a new project run by the New South Wales government. And hopefully Greg will be able to join us because I worked quite closely with him. I have put some links on my slides. If you cannot access them through the slide deck, I'm happy to put them in the chat while other speakers are on. So we actually, AussieWay is a digital accessibility professionalization. We're actually working on projects around procurement particularly, which I'll get to in a moment, and also other projects around embedding accessibility earlier, upskilling accessibility SMEs, and a few other projects in that space. We are very much a not-for-profit for people with lived experience. We love to have them as members and enjoy their co-facilitation that they help develop our projects with. So I really appreciate that. Just trying to see if my slides will move. I'm also going to acknowledge the Ngunnawal people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm meeting in Canberra here, and pay respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal Nation, both past and present. And I extend this respect to all Aboriginal and or Torres Strait Islander peoples in attendance today. And I welcome, if you'd like to share in the chat where you're meeting from today. It'd be nice to know the kind of range of people and where you're joining us from. So just a little bit of background in what's happening in Australia in this space. A couple of year or so ago, a couple of years ago, the Zero Project, there was a project by the South Australian government. They developed an online toolkit, and it won at the Zero Project, and it really highlighted the need for a lot of accessibility advice and guidance. It's a wonderful toolkit. I recommend having a look at that. But there was a big gap that was identified in that toolkit, and that was around accessible ICT procurement. What we did is we talked to the Zero Project and presented the idea of maybe how we would develop some procurement processes and guidance to be added to the toolkit. And we started to reach out and form a subcommittee for AussieWay from a variety of different areas. Specifically the Australian Network on Disability, who had started an accessible ICT task force at a higher level around the business and the procurement space. And we as accessibility professionals supported that as a subcommittee, trying to find some idea of guidance that could be consistent across anyone that would work in a procurement space. So accessibility SMEs could be trained up into how they would provide that guidance. That work has involved not only the New South Wales government now, but also South Australian government. I've had recently calls with the Victorian government and the Queensland government here in Australia. So there's quite a wide selection of people already doing some similar things, and we're just bringing them all together so that it's not siloed, and we can actually work together on some outputs for this. So one of the things we started with in this project was we did some empathy mapping. We actually workshopped online using an accessible, well, not completely accessible, but it's not too bad, a tool called Easy Retro, to start understanding what people's interest is and how they actually see the challenges and the opportunities for accessible ICT procurement. We ran quite a few sessions with procurement officers, with project officers, with accessibility SMEs, but also with end users, people who use vendor products and services. And we started to get a bit of a picture, and we developed some user stories on what their pain points are and what they'd like to see change. The analysis came up with these kind of findings. So there was a very high interest and appetite for what we're creating from the various user groups. There needs to be more guidelines and resources to address different levels of accessibility readiness, specifically in the checking of large vendors and the support of small, medium vendors. Accessibility procurement, that we have the standards, everything is in place, it's legislated, but it's not enforced. So there's no one doing any checking. And there's no mandate from organisational leaders to purchase accessible ICT products, or that's very limited. We're actually learning that there are some things happening in that space, which I'll get to in a moment. Vendors say their products are accessible, but this is rarely checked. And difficulties getting vendors to engage in this process. Even in our empathy mapping, we had one vendor attend. So the interest in them understanding why their products need to be accessible was not well known. So what's come out of this is that we've been meeting now every couple of weeks for a year, this subcommittee of accessibility SMEs across private sector and government. We've developed a journey map of what people's processes are and how they support their procurement and project teams internally. And that's given us an idea of where there's some consistent advice, where the standards are helping, where there's some checks. But we also highlighted some gaps. One of the gaps that we've really highlighted is that there's nowhere to really find out if a product or a service is accessible. So we've developed an approach based on any public knowledge around whether there's an accessibility statement, an ACR or a VPAT, to actually give a product a score. And we are working on this project as part of aussieway.org to put this on our website so that pre any kind of tender approach, just some interest in what's that product, how accessible is it, you'd be able to go to this page or this site and be able to go and assess the accessibility of that product. We want to work with vendors and on their products and their roadmaps for how they're going to improve. So it will be a very transparent and open process for us to share that product list and how we're doing the scoring. But also we're considering an approach where we actually put in a feedback form for people with disability who have issues with products they use, and using aussieway.org as a advocacy support to then provide a central source to assist with vendor support. So how can they build into their roadmap improvements for accessibility? So that's pretty much all of it from me. But if you'd like to be involved in our project, if you'd like to join AussieWay, just go to aussieway.org. A lot of it's on the website. If you'd like to find out a little bit more about how our projects are working, we've got some updates on our blog. And please subscribe to our newsletter to find out about the future work that AussieWay is doing in this space. We are very keen to actually develop specific training for accessibility SMEs to support their procurement and project colleagues. Because we understand it's a little bit like cyber. You don't expect the procurement officer to understand all the accessibility needs for the procurement checks that need to happen. What you probably just need to do is just to reach out to a subject matter expert who can help you. That's pretty much it from me, Wayne. That's a bit of a background in a few minutes, and I'm happy to take any questions. I think you're mute, Wayne, if you're talking. Oh, yeah, yep, you're right now.
It's good? Okay, yeah, I think there'll be a lot of questions and comments. So some interesting things that you mentioned, the idea that in Australia we have, the standards and in place, but there's no checking of implementation or if they're being used appropriately. And really fascinating to hear about the Aussie way, essentially a database of what's accessible and what's not, because I think for many in the procurement space, this is a big learning curve of bringing procurement officers up to speed on what's accessible and how do you test that. So a really interesting idea there. Thanks. So now, Greg, are you online? No? Okay, so Greg hasn't joined us yet. So Nirmita, we'll go directly to you if that's okay. If you'd like to share your experience from the Indian perspective. Thank you. Nirmita, are you online?
Audio now on. Yeah, hi, apologies.
Thank you.
Record menu button. Share screen. Close tab, close tab, close. Security. Can you hear me? Start my mute. Start my video. Alt plus space. Video now start.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, okay. Hello everyone, and it's a pleasure to be here. And I'm here to just quickly give a perspective on what is happening in India with respect to accessible procurement. We have a huge constituency of persons with disabilities and a lot of technology usage, over 1.1 billion mobile users, and as of a year ago. And in 2016, we passed the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act. And that act mandates that all services should be accessible for persons with disabilities. It talks about reasonable accommodation, universal design. And Section 40 says that government has to publish and notify standards with respect to accessibility in the area of ICT, transportation, and physical infrastructure. Section 42 requires government to make electronic content, all content, electronic media, and consumer goods accessible. And what is really important is that Indian law is mandatory for both the public and private sector. So Section 46 says that all standards which are published under the rules of this act are binding, are mandatory for both the public and private sector. So following this, the government initiated a process to set up a committee which would look at, study what standards and laws and policies are there globally. And this committee was a multi-stakeholder committee with people from the industry, a lot of government agencies, and more importantly, lots of persons with disabilities and organizations of persons with disabilities. It was decided that this job would be given to CDAG, Center for Development of Advanced Computing. It was an agency under the Government of India, Ministry of Electronic and IT, and a committee was set up in the Bureau of Indian Standards to look to develop the standard. So the first thing, I think it was decided that there was wide stakeholder consultation, and it was decided that we would adopt the EN 301549. But the government was also keen that it has to be done ASAP, and there was a lot of discussion going on, and it was finally decided that let's publish the standard in two parts. And the first part would be accessibility requirements, and that could be done, without much discussion, as soon as possible. So the first part 1 on accessibility requirements of Indian Standard IS 17802 was published in December 2021. And after a lot of discussion, the part 2 on determinants of conformance was published in May 2022. There was a lot of consultation with a lot of experts around the country. It was COVID time, so we had so many online discussions and online meetings, and the inputs received from different experts were incorporated and presented. So finally we had both these parts of the standard notified, Indian Standard 17802. And earlier this year, the government has also amended the rules of the RPD Act, section Rule 15, to say to specifically bring in the name of the standard into the law, and says that everybody should conform to IS 17802. And so this is more or less the EN standard as is, with some slight additions or modifications in the notes, and that is primarily with respect to requirements of Indian languages. We have 22 official languages with different scripts, and also references to any Indian standards, like those notified by the Ministry of Information Broadcasting, or the guidelines for Indian government websites. And a lot of agencies were involved in this, like Technology Development for Indian Languages, the Broadcasting Ministry, and so on. So I think these references and notes, some notes here and there, were the only modifications. Otherwise, this is pretty much EN as is. And I think that's where we are, and we need to kind of gear up and see how we get an implementation underway. So that's where we are in India. I'm done. I'm happy to answer more questions, I guess, later on.
Sure. Thanks so much, Nirmita. That was really interesting. I mean, one of the key things that I think is often left out of this is the importance of having people with disability at the table. When you were talking about the development of the committee and how that was a significant part of the composition of the committee, it really speaks to that, the commitment to get it right. So very interested to hear that. Thanks. We'll go now to Vashkar. Vashkar, if you'd like to give us the perspective from Bangladesh. And just if Greg Alchin hasn't joined, Bri has said that she can actually speak to Greg's slide. So if Greg hasn't come online by the time you finish, Vashkar, we'll ask Bri to step in and speak to Greg's slides. Thanks.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you very much. And you can stop me anytime if I speak a lot, okay? Respected moderators, panelists, and ladies and gentlemen. Greetings from Bangladesh. We are now in I think, around 5:20 or 30 a.m. now in my country. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm really pleased to see all of my known people here, including Gunala and other panelists. Ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about the inclusive and barrier-free society, barrier-free world, etc. In Bangladesh, from 2009 to 2021, there was a decade dedicated to transformation of digital Bangladesh. And almost all the service which are possible are transformed into a digital service. We have around 3,000 websites in our national portal with 52,000 offices are connected. Almost 2,000 plus e-services are now through My Governor. It's called My Governor apps. And almost 350 digital services are provided through Union Digital Center. And there is many other initiative has taken, such as e-learning platform. Almost 300 plus e-learning courses in Bangla language are available for citizens. And there is a skill portal, is called Nice portals. So there's many digital services are available. During this decade, we have realized that there is not a single digital service which are accessible for people with disabilities. That's really a biggest discrimination has made, as our government has a 3 commitment through their political, legal, and global level commitments. One is current government has a manifesto, political manifesto, and they have talked about the disability inclusion and accessibility. The second is the legal commitment. Government has adopted a Persons with Disability Rights and Protection Act 2013, and there is a separate section on digital accessibility. And also they have adopted act is called Neurodevelopment Trust Act to ensure more vulnerable groups such as autism and neurodevelopment disability, intellectual disability, etc. And very importantly, Bangladesh was the first 20 country who have ratified the UN Convention of Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Bangladesh has ratified, as you know, there is a accessibility is one of the significant part, Article 9, Article 21, many more. And also recently Bangladesh provide exception on the Marrakesh BIPTT, that is another international treaty by the WIPO for ensuring accessibility. Based on these 3 commitments, political, legal, and international commitment, Bangladesh government has realized we need to ensure the inclusion and accessibility for digital technology. Hence, they have adopted National Web and Digital Service Accessibility Guideline in 2022, and also taken initiative to ensure that all the procurement process of digital technology must be ensure a section for accessibility. And they have included this guideline in the procurement process. Now, no digital product can be procured without ensuring accessibility. Hence, we are seeing rapidly the situation is changing. Now, people with disabilities are able to purchase their train ticket. They're able to apply for their disability certification. Almost 2.9 million people with disabilities are getting disability allowance from their mobile phone, and they can apply from anywhere in the country through online system. And the people who are low literate or don't have the technology, they can go to the Union Digital Center. There is an entrepreneur who can support them for any applications, passport, birth registrations, whatever digital services are available. So that means the people who don't have the connectivity, who don't have the device, who don't know how to use them, they can go to the Union Digital Center and they can take the assistance from the entrepreneur of the Union Digital Center. This is a remarkable change we are making. As Bangladesh government has announced a smart Bangladesh, and a smart Bangladesh has a 4 pillar. One is a smart government, a smart economy, a smart society, a smart citizen. And one of the most important motto of this smart Bangladesh is zero digital divide. Bangladesh government are going to launch Equality Center in UNGA in 2023 in September. And one of the most significant part of this Equality Center is to ensure equality for all, including people with disabilities. And I think I have taken lots of time, even though I want to say more, but a few things I would like to add here. We are in a beginning stage of ensuring accessibility and inclusion in digital space. We need the international cooperation, like country like Australia, Japan, other country. I am really inviting you, including all the international organizations who have the knowledge and expertise on inclusion and accessibility. Please collaborate with us. I'm calling my neighboring country like India. You can come up to support us. Lastly, I can tell you, with my leadership, one national problem has solved, that is the reading problem. Now, students with disabilities are getting accessible books, grade 1 to grade 10, in the beginning of the educational year. I can give you many updates. I'd like to end here by noting one point. IGF, APrIGF, all the internet governance, regional and international forums, we want to see more participation of people with disabilities, which are missing. Person like us are not able to go there as there is no resource for us. So this is really creating a discrimination. And I believe in future, we will see many faces from the persons disability community in such these types of international, regional, and local IGF and issues. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Vashkar. That was really interesting. I think a lot of us could learn from your experience in Bangladesh. It sounds like you're really moving forward in great bounds to make sure that everybody's included, particularly with that Smart Bangladesh project. I mean, that's a wonderful thing to think that, the Smart Citizen includes Bangladeshi with disability. So really grateful to hear that. Thank you. Is Greg online? Has he joined us? Okay. Bree, Canela told me that you've offered to speak to Greg's slides. Are you happy to do that now?
Yeah, definitely. That's fine.
Okay. Thanks for that.
I'm just going to share my screen again. There's some interesting updates that's happening in the New South Wales government, and Greg has shared it a couple of times through our Aussie Way sub-procurement committee. So I'm not the expert, Greg is, but I'll do my best to share what's happening in that space. And it's just so wonderful to hear about what's happening in India and Bangladesh too. Hopefully we can pull our resources and work on some of these projects together. I've reached out to so that we can connect a little bit more and invite you, maybe Vashkar and Nirmita, to one of our procurement meetings. But yes, I'm just going to share a little bit about what's happening in New South Wales government. I was there. Sorry, was there someone there? No.
Yeah, sorry, it's me.
Oh, Greg, you're here. Yay.
Yeah.
Go for it, Greg. I'll
All
go
right,
on
I
mute.
thought we were starting at 10. My apologies.
All
Greg,
right.
All right.
Greg, it's Wayne. Thanks for coming online. The other panelists have already spoken. Bri had kindly offered to just briefly speak to your slides, but I think now that you're here in person, you could probably do that yourself. So the floor is open to you. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you, Bri. So, look, the biggest thing for us is looking at what is a practical approach to how we achieve this. And of course, it has to be standards-based approach. So, of course, the ACCAN 301-549, which is the accessibility requirements, which we know India, of course, comes from Europe, but India's adopted it, Canada, Australia has all adopted that, and it's absolutely huge in what we're trying to do in that space. But it's not just that standard, because whilst that looks at what we build and buy, it's also leveraging in other standards, such as AS 3071, which is also an ISO standard on the ICT Code of Practice, also 3100, which is risk management, but also compliance management. We need to have all of those standards together, because that means what we're going to do means that we can do this in a consistent way. And if it's standards-based, then we can not only start it in one agency, but then we can start to replicate it across all of our agencies. And it means that we're also aligning our practices to that consistent international approach. So it's because most of our standards here in Australia are also based on those ISO standards. Now, what does it mean in practical terms for us? I think the best analogy on this is to think about buying a car. Why? In Australia, we have the car safety standards, and I know a lot of other countries also have car safety standards. So we have those a 5-star safety rating. In other words, we make a decision when we're procuring about what are the standards that we're going to accept. So in 301-549, there is that functional performance statement within Section 4. So what do? Yes, I'm going to buy a product that everybody can use regardless of their cognitive, sensory, or physical abilities. That's the performance I want the product to buy. I'm not going to accept a product that doesn't do that. It's the same as I'm not going to buy a product that doesn't have cybersecurity in it. I'm not going to buy a car that only has 3 wheels and half the nuts off it. Now, once we know what that performance standard is, and it doesn't matter, and that's the beauty of 301, whether it's a website, a mobile app, an interactive kiosk, the whole lot. How do we do it in practical terms? Well, we look at the relevant accessibility requirements within that standard. So, of course, in a website or a mobile app, it's going to be essentially the current WCAG requirements. The other thing that we do that's slightly differently to the standard is that we're starting a process of co-designing and co-identifying solutions with customers. So we're currently in New South Wales developing a workplace passport for staff with disabilities and staff with other needs. And that's a whole co-design process. Yes, we know what the performance is. We know the accessibility requirements, but we're now co-designing that solution. We're also designing a co-design toolkit on that one so that we can replicate that across government. Now, within there, we're building and buying to those requirements. Now, it's a very simple thing. When we're buying, did we say to the vendors, what did I need? Proof. I need proof that your product meets this. Say yes, in a lot of cases, we'll ask for a voluntary product accessibility template document. Most of us will look at those documents, and particularly procurement teams, and their eyes will glaze over. So what's the multiple forms of evidence that you ask for, the correlating evidence? So are you now asking for? Show me where it is in your help files. Show me where it's in your user manual there. If it's not in there, then I'm a bit worried about what you've written in your VPAT. Also, when I'm down to my final 3, show me proof of life. Show me how the product works on a standard device, whether it's an iPad, a Mac, a phone, a PC, laptop, whatever it is, doesn't matter. Show me in practical terms proof of life. If it can't work with the inbuilt accessibility features on those devices, whatever you've written on your VPAT isn't consistent. And for product teams where we're saying, okay, if you've co-designed, what are you doing here? Hopefully you've got staff members with disabilities on that procurement panel, because they will tell you whether it does or doesn't work as well. Now, as if you have told suppliers up front, here's the evidence that I want, and you're clear about those multiple forms of evidence, then it allows you to test and evaluate against that. Now, part of that in practical terms is, hey, if it doesn't reach WCAG level A, for instance, I'm not even going to consider looking at the product because it has to meet minimum level A. I would prefer AA or AAA, but to even get a look in, it has to reach AA. And it's going through that process. And there are simple things as Bri and I know through the wonderful work of Andrew Norman, where we look at, do a quick count up of how many meets the requirements in the VPAT document. That'll help in that process as well, but allows you to make objective decisions about a go and a no-go about whether you make that procurement. Now, the final stinger is this. We know because in practical terms, procurement guidelines and standards such as 301 and Section 508 in the US have been around for longer than what we've adopted them here in Australia. A lot of major products will meet those requirements. Some small to medium enterprises won't, and then their eyes will glaze over and ask, what are we asking for? What I do there is I look at it as a progress payment with a house. So if we've had to select a product in the end that doesn't meet all of our requirements because it's the best of what's available within that spot, not perfect, we go, well, in the contract, when we were writing it up at the start, we said, if those products do not meet all of the standards, then we don't give all the money. It's like a progress payment in the house. If you built the frame, we'll pay you for the frame. If you put the roof on, we'll pay you for the roof. And so it's a bit of a carrot and stick. Now, one of the things in government is they don't realise that they can do that. And so it's about putting mandatory requirements in that procurement process, because there's no things, it's going to come out in the next version. They're going, yeah, well, when's the next version? Oh, we're not sure. And I just go, no. It doesn't work like that. And so finally, I think the other thing that we do in that process is that we collect metrics on there. And that's what we've started, because we've undertaken an audit of our services here in Service New South Wales, is then looking at that whole process. How do you collect metrics on what you're doing in that procurement space, or in the build space? Because if you haven't got metrics, how are you measuring change and improvement? And that's the approach that we're doing. So yes, there is still a need for a national and a state digital accessibility policy, but also what we're doing is going, what can we do now? And there's some of the things that we're doing here in New South Wales. Wayne, back to you.
Thanks, Greg. That was really good. I mean, we've had some earlier comments about, the policies and things, but it was really good to hear about the practical steps of actually, implementing those policies and getting them to be working, on the ground. So thank you for that contribution. And we're going to go now just to open the floor for questions and comments. And I think Ganella has somebody who's a participant online from Japan who has some things that they would like to speak to. No?
Thank you, Wayne. This is Gonala here. Yes, I would like to introduce Professor Hajime Yamada, who came to Australia in the year 2000 or so, and spoke about public procurement and IT accessibility criteria. And at the time I thought, well, this is something that we need to do more of in Australia. And that's where my journey came with this particular area. So I'm really delighted, and Wayne and I are very pleased to have Professor Hajime Yamada coming in from Japan, explaining the particular situation in Japan. So over to you, Professor.
Well, yes, hello. My name is Hajime Yamada. Thank you very much for giving me the chance to know what is going on in Australia, India, and Bangladesh. So I'd like to briefly explain what is going on in Japan. Unfortunately, there is no legislation or regulation in Japan that mandates ICT accessibility in procurement. Even in public procurement, the decision of purchase accessible product was left to the intention of the public body. However, recently 2 agencies established a policy measure to pursue ICT accessibility. The Digital Agency has worked with Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications to formulate procurement guidelines that request government agencies to conform accessibility of procuring system. The guidelines are ineffective now. A government agency seeking to procure information systems asks bidders to submit a document regarding accessibility. Bidders will state in the document how they meet national standard of information accessibility. The government agency will refer to this document when determining successful bidders. The mechanism is a first step towards mandatory public procurement. And I and my colleagues will continue to work with the Japanese government to move the procurement system forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And it's good to hear that things are moving forward. And we all know that these type of mechanisms take much too much time, but that's where we're at.
Ganella, I don't think we can hear you very well.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much. And I appreciate the insights that you've provided from Japan. And we know that these type of mechanisms take time. And we wish they didn't take so much time, but we are all working on that in different ways. So thank you very much, Professor Yamada. And over to you, Wayne.
Thanks, everybody. Unfortunately, we're very close to time. I guess we could have gone a lot longer with this session, but just it's time to wrap up. But I just wanted to thank everybody, all the participants and the speakers. Thank you so much for your contributions. I think what we've discovered is that there's a lot of really good work going on across the various jurisdictions that have been represented today. And, you know, this has been a good starting point for us to all connect and collaborate and support the work that's happening across the Asia Pacific in this area, which is so important to make sure that, you know, all of our respective citizens and have access to the appropriate, accessible information and communications technologies that we need in this ever-increasing digital economy and society that we all live in. So, sorry we've run out of time, but thank you all again so much for your participation today.
Audio now unmuted alert. Audio start my video. Alt space. Video now start.
Thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, all. Very nice to have you.
Space. Video now stopped alert. Start my video. Alt. Mute. Mute. Space. Mute. The host muted you.